Alan, thank you so much for coming here today.
Oh, thanks, Ravi. Yes.
And I've known Alan for a very long time. What a career you've had, from being a world open champion in chess to being a tech visionary. That's a huge shift. Yeah, do you still play chess?
I do at Pega World each year. I play 15 or 20 of my clients. It's actually a lot of fun. But I don't play. I haven't played seriously.
And you still win?
Uh, you know, I
Or I
lose.
should ask your clients.
I lose 10%. If I can keep it to 10% losses, I feel pretty good about it.
Perfect. So, Alan, you've been a real tech visionary, and I know I've been talking to you for more than a year on this extraordinary new uh, product release you did using the power of generative AI. I just saw a demo of that. I was just blown away. Tell us a little bit about what Blueprint is and how it is going to be, or rather, how it has been designed to be uniquely different to everybody else's AI native layer.
Mhm. So, Blueprint is designed to let an organization rethink its business processes, to reimagine
Yeah.
how it wants the services and the core elements of how it builds things, manages customers, handles issues, handles sales. All of those processes are central to a business. And what we use Blueprint for is to take our best practices in workflows, which we've spent a lot of years designing and building and understanding workflows, to be able to take the customer's insights out of their documents and other information that describe the customer, to take the power of the internet in terms of asking the internet, hey, what's the best practice for order to cash in this sort of situation for this sort of industry? And then also with our partnership to add in the Cognizant IP that can be relevant to that. And then what Blueprint does is it grinds that all together and comes up with a set of proposals for what are the life cycles, what are the business processes, and then it enables business IT consultants to come in and collaborate and perfect them. So you can really, really come up with an approach to have an awesome collection of workflows that define your business. And then at runtime, the technology will enable an LLM to act as an agent to intermediate between the questioner, the person, and those workflows. So you get the power of freewheeling. I'm going to do what the person asks if they're allowed to, if they have the security, tied to really responsible and predictable workflows in a way that I've not seen anywhere else in the market.
So, Alan, when you built this firm, I remember a few years ago when I was talking to you, you said you want to be this pioneering business digital workflow company on the planet. The classical software had its restrictions, and in some ways, it created this divide between the ones who were owning the process and building the process to the ones who were developing it. Do you now believe that you're now living your vision with that blurring line, with this amazing technology, which is kind of we're all embracing?
I think AI has given us a chance to break down a lot of the historical walls between business and IT so they can actually really work together. But it's interesting, it's also broken down the walls between individual apps. Historically, companies would go in and buy an app and then try to figure out how to wire it into their business. In a workflow oriented way of thinking, in a more agentic oriented way of thinking, you can really think of a fabric of business processes that drive the automation of the business, that actually break down traditional boundaries between apps and between the people who figure out what they want the business to do.
Got it. How would you, how would you deal with the heterogeneity of enterprises? I mean, one of the reasons why SaaS software got so heavily customized, or for that matter, when you built the core workflow engines for enterprises, they were all, you were uniquely different because you provided them the engine to build for the heterogeneity, even if you were a repeatable software. What happens in the agentic world to deal with that heterogeneity?
Well, the heterogeneity is really key. And I think a lot of people who fool around with these little prototypes they miss the reality of what it's going to be like to roll this out across multiple countries, multiple products, multiple variations. We're really fortunate. This blueprint capability, et cetera, it's all brand new using LLMs, but it's built on an architecture that we've been working on for literally 4 decades. And in the heart of that architecture, in the heart of our workflow engine, is something we call the layer cake, something we've patented. And what the layer cake does is it lets you say, hey, as a business, you're going to have certain things that go across the entire business, but I'm going to have variations, maybe for one division versus another division, maybe for one business area versus another business area. Maybe I'm going to overlay things that are different in France versus North America versus Canada. And those variations, that heterogeneity, is built into the Pega architecture.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, so it's almost like all of this work we've done for all of the years getting ready to now was lying in wait for AI to make it easier, because it's enabled us to overcome the historical problem we've had where it could be a little complicated and require to overly specialized skills. I think we've been able to make it so you can get ordinary business people, ordinary technologists to come together in a very, very different way.
We will have this mini producer revolution, if I may. One of the things we are excited about the agentic world is the agent development cycles are going to be more complex to integrate versus software development cycles. Software development cycles add deterministic logic talking to microprocessors. We're building services around the LLM, which means in the agent development cycles, you have to design for behavior, you have to scope for outcomes, and you have to be iterative in your development because agents learn. And more importantly, you don't just switch on for the run, you keep the lights on, but you actually have to supervise them. So we think we have a ton of more work. It's also structured plus unstructured data.
Mm-hmm.
It's deterministic plus probabilistic, and it's human plus digital labor. So we are super excited about the fact that this actually means more. This actually means more work for a system integrator, more critical for enterprises. I had a question for you. In the world of agentic, where a lot of it is going to be probabilistic, there's always layers of deterministic which will remain in enterprises. So companies which are building agentic work on your platforms, where do they hold the deterministic layer?
Well, the workflows are the deterministic layer. If you can use the AI at design time to generate a couple of hundred workflows that you can look at and say, yeah, I like the way that works. That's going to be okay.
Those remain deterministic.
And those are deterministic.
Yeah.
So the deterministic parts provide great comfort to overcoming some of the issues that I think you correctly point out. And the deterministic parts make the non-deterministic parts way easier to build because they're much more limited, and you can put a box around them. You can limit what the non-deterministic parts do. Because I think it's going to be very hard to build governance in after the fact, right? Administering agents and trying to control them, it's going to be pretty tricky, particularly as you point out that they can change over time and with versions of agents that come out.
Yeah, I have AI labs. I'll love to host you there, and I'm quite sure you'll have very provocative thoughts knowing you. One of the things my teams are working on is something called uncertainty limits. Effectively, when business situations come in, there are going to be situations where probabilistic logic will work, and you default to rule-based logic after a limit, and those guardrails are defined, and you can tweak the guardrails. So my teams are working on something called semantic density and uncertainty limits, where you could swing between a reasoning layer and a probabilistic layer, depending on what the scenario is. So it'll be interesting to see how all of this.
I'd love to have a conversation with them. My view on it would be that you'd really like to make as much as you can be deterministic. Then if it's one of these things with uncertainty, maybe you have the AI propose an answer, and then depending on a risk assessment, you decide if you want that answer to become validated or verified prior to taking effect. And you could run it, and that's a workflow too. You could run it through an approval workflow of some sort. And once it's approved, you can then make it part of your corpus of standards.
Yep,
And
yep.
so your standards continue to increase as you find other edge cases. And eventually, let's face it, eventually there'll be a very small number of edge cases in many of the business domains in which we work. I'm not saying this is correct for all business domains, but there's an awful lot of business domains where you really want to have the first transaction and the 100th transaction done the same way. And if that's probabilistic, somebody's going to get upset, I suspect.
Yeah. So, Alan, let me ask you one other question. In the world of enterprises versus consumer-led AI, where LLMs have been very popular, there is enough research to say small language models are better suitable because they're very specific to a task and they're very domain centric. If somebody has to feed a small language model into Blueprint versus a frontier model you are feeding from, or do you have provisions to get build a small language model from a large language model before it feeds into the processes you're building on Blueprint?
So we've put Blueprint on Pega.com. It's available for free to anybody. Its content is private to you as an individual,
Yeah.
and the work Cognizant does with its customers is going to be private to Cognizant and those individual customers. We've said that we're financing the best large language models in the world to do the design. And that's what Blueprint does. It uses those. I have no plans to make the smaller language models.
And you believe the large language models are good enough to?
I think they're pretty remarkable, particularly if you use them in a collaborative way to come up with the ideal workflow.
Yeah.
They suggest things that actually are brand new in some cases.
So I just give you a school of thought which other enterprise software companies have been propagating, which is the small language models.
Yeah, well, for language interpretation. So, for
Yeah.
example, for a particular task, like reading a document and parsing words out of it, absolutely, we support the use of small language models for that. We support the use of a customer's language model or a partner's language model for that. We think that those sort of task-specific things are going to have very specialized models that make sense. And we use the MCP technology to be able to pull those in to the pictures as we use them. However, for the design itself, which for us is the revolutionary idea, which is how do I actually use the language model to change how I think about my business, I really think that merits a large language model, and we're paying for it, and we're happy to, by the way.
Yeah. And in fact, you're right, actually. I mean, in some ways, if you have to do a specific task in a specific way, then a machine learning model is good enough. Why do you need a generative model?
Absolutely.
So the generative model is built for iteratively doing differently in some ways.
And it's built for all sorts of scenarios when in fact what you really want is maybe you want a machine learning model, maybe you just want a decision table.
Let me, punch in one more question to you. Last week from your hometown, MIT came up with a report which actually took the shine off the infrastructure AI companies, because it spoke about how 95% of the proof of concepts in enterprises failed. And it spoke about learning gaps between tools and organizations, not just organizations, tools as well. I mean, what you're talking about in Blueprint is kind of in line with what that says. I mean, tools had a gap, and that's why there was a problem. The second was data, clean data being available, good data being available. And the third aspect was outweighed expectations from AI. And I hope enterprises learn, but I was wondering whether you had any specific call outs for companies who are starting to embrace this journey. I mean, I was really impressed with all the things I've seen all the way from January of last year
Mhm.
at Davos to now. You've been progressively building this, and now you put a kiosk here, which pretty much does it like a real pro. You can build things, and you don't need to be a developer to do things. Going through this process, and now I'm seeing this MIT report, which really is an interesting one. Tell us, what are the lookout areas for enterprises, and what should they be watchful about?
So I think it's really important that enterprises know enough and learn enough to use the right AI the right way at the right time. The disconnect happens when somebody does reasoning when they want to do execution, or when somebody doesn't use the AI to be creative. We think it's fine for the AI to help the creative process. You just don't want it to do that for the first time with a new customer. And what we've worked very hard in Blueprint is to bring the power of the right AI to the right part in the way a business wants to run. And I think that takes the cautionary tales from MIT, who we obviously, you know, given how Pega grew up, we love dearly. It takes those cautionary tales and it says, yeah, we embrace that because we're using the right AI the right way at the right moment.
If I may ask you, if a customer chooses to bring their own frontier model and use Blueprint, will that work
Well, Blueprint is really tied in
to
to a
the?
whole lot of technology. It's not just some call to the model. The Blueprint, if you see it work, you'll see how it's grinding through things, and so it's
So it's
really
really
part.
integrated into the
It's a
model.
really agentic integration of this design
So you
concept.
would you would lock, stock, and barrel take the whole
So
piece.
that's Blueprint outputs something which you then can use.
So what would
In,
you
in,
tell?
in running it, though,
Yeah.
if a customer has a particular step in a workflow where they want to call their own frontier model, they want to call their own small language model, both of those are fully supported in Blueprint. Blueprint will allow the executing workflow to call out to any one of those open architecture things.
Got it. But its core engine is sitting in a model which is deeply integrated with Blueprint.
Deeply integrated, but remember at runtime, Blueprint isn't working at runtime. Its workflows are working.
Got it.
Blueprint emits the workflows, and then the workflows, which is what Pega has built its entire business on all
Yeah.
these years, those are what's actually running. They're just now able to also themselves call large or small language models to do individual parts of the workflow.
Let me ask you one provocative question.
Please.
How would you counter the? I mean, you are a boutique, sleek, next generation company out of Boston, and there are very few outside the Silicon Valley. You're one of them. How would you counter the big giants who also are now having the same drumbeat on agentic?
Well, the trouble is there's so much hype and so much BS that everyone says AI, everyone says agentic. You got to peel it open a little bit. And you realize that what we're saying is, yeah, use your reasoning at design time. Don't do the reasoning at runtime. And you go look at any of the other big guys, and they are completely in the opposite camp. And so
And
it's
they're
not
using the reasoning
in
in
runtime.
runtime.
Yeah, they're making decisions at runtime based on data, including the nuances in the data, which may not all be clean, based on however they were trained. They're seeing things they're inventing for the first time to decide whether to grant a mortgage, or to decide what interest rate to charge, or to decide whether somebody should qualify for this particular insurance policy or that particular insurance policy. That's ridiculous. At runtime, that should have already been figured out in advance, right? And by the way, so that's what our approach is. Completely different than any of the big players like Microsoft, like Salesforce, like ServiceNow. They've all gone down. What we think is and by the way, I love this because it's not that I'm saying we're 20% ahead. We're structurally different. The structure of how we do this is really geared around a predictable two-stage process as opposed to creating an AI that is just going to figure it all out.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you so much. Always a pleasure and always a great learning.
Well, and we appreciate the partnership. I think we're going to be able to learn a lot together.
We are
on
very
how to
excited
do
about the
this.
partnership. 2025, we were the partner of the year for
Yes.
Pega. We hold one of the largest pools of talent on Pega. We continue to make this a strategic partnership for us, and we're very excited to take Blueprint to our clients.
Excellent. Well, let's do a great job together at that.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Good
you.
to see you.